Welcome to Tech Blueprint, a window that lets you know the latest technology news in the world. The U.S. semiconductor blockade war against China has escalated again. At present, Washington is forcibly cutting off the position of Chinese companies in the global semiconductor supply chain. U.S. giants represented by Applied Materials and Lam Research have issued notices to suppliers, requiring them to gradually eliminate any part supply from China. This news has shocked the industry, because China happens to be the world's largest semiconductor consumer market. Today, U.S. companies seem to be determined to decouple from China. What is the cost? What is the impact? Is this wave of operations beneficial or detrimental? A global competition to reshape the supply chain has quietly begun. Since the start of the Sino-US trade war, the United States has been constantly hitting a combination punch in the chip field. This time, the United States is no longer simply restricting China from buying chips, but to remove China from the supply chain of U.S. companies. Industry giants such as Applied Materials and Lam Research have asked suppliers to abandon all Chinese parts by 2025. You know, the semiconductor supply chain is so complicated that any small link may affect the whole body. Forcibly desinicization means higher costs and technical difficulties. The fundamental reason behind this move is undoubtedly due to the U.S.'s national security considerations. For the United States, China is a potential opponent. If China is involved in the semiconductor supply chain, what if it is choked at a critical moment? But can this wave of operations really get rid of dependence on China? This ban seems fierce, but there are more hidden dangers behind it. Pain point 1: the soaring cost of the supply chain and the self-harm of American companies. The semiconductor industry is all about reducing costs and increasing efficiency. Forcing the supply chain to de-China is not only time-consuming and labor-intensive, but also inevitably brings high costs. It can be said that this move by the United States hurts the enemy 1,000 times and hurts itself 800 times. For example, large equipment manufacturers such as Applied Materials and Lam Research have long relied on China's high-cost component supply. Now that Chinese suppliers are cut off abruptly, it means that alternative solutions need to be found. Not only will the cost rise, but also the products and technical processes of new suppliers have to be adapted again. What's more frustrating is that the semiconductor industry has extremely high technical requirements. Alternative suppliers must not only be strong, but also meet cost standards. Now that China has occupied a large share of the global supply of key semiconductor components, it is simply impossible to expect to find equally high-quality and low-priced substitutes in the short term. When it comes to the stage of large-scale replacement, supply chain imbalance and soaring costs are probably inevitable. On the one hand, the United States is afraid that China will strangle it, and on the other hand, it has to bear the risk of soaring costs. This dilemma situation is probably something that the United States itself did not expect, right? Pain point 2: the difficulty of desinicization of the supply chain. Where do substitutes come from? It is not difficult to expect the supply chain to desinicize, but it is difficult to find a suitable substitute player. In other words, an implicit logic of the U.S. ban this time is, as long as there are people outside China who can do it, but the question is whether this is really the case. After years of development, China has formed a wide layout in the semiconductor industry chain. From upstream silicon wafers and equipment to downstream packaging and testing, many key links have irreplaceable roles. Take wafer manufacturing equipment as an example. Although China does not have the most advanced production technology, it has achieved a high self-sufficiency rate in the mid and low-end fields. Under the U.S. ban, U.S. companies have to turn to higher-cost suppliers or look for European, Japanese, and Korean manufacturers, which not only suffers in price, but also in delivery cycle and service support. Moreover, the cost of desinicization of the semiconductor supply chain is so high, how long can the United States bear it? And even if China is kicked out of the supply chain, where are the alternative resources to fill the gap in the short term? This operation is like pulling out your own life-saving grass and expecting pie in the sky to fall. Pain point 3. U.S. companies' dependence on the Chinese market cannot be avoided. Not only the supply chain, but also the dependence of U.S. semiconductor companies on the Chinese market is ubiquitous. Data shows that China is the largest customer of Applied Materials and Lam Research, accounting for more than 30% of their global revenue. To put it bluntly, cutting off Chinese suppliers can be tolerated, but cutting off Chinese customers? It is estimated that U.S. companies will be distressed for a while. Now U.S. companies are reluctant to operate in order to de-Sinicization, but leaving the Chinese market will make them lose more. However, this loss is slowly boiling a frog in warm water and will not be noticed immediately, but once it ferments, it is bound to cause U.S. companies to suffer considerable losses. For American semiconductor equipment manufacturers, the Chinese market not only has huge demand, but also supports their innovation capabilities. Without this part of the income, American companies may also lack the stamina in innovation and research and development. Can this shackle that they put on themselves really bring the expected sense of security? Moreover, as one of the world's largest semiconductor markets, China will lose this market and its future development layout will become extremely difficult. In short, this set of U.S. bans may seem to be seeking progress in stability, but it is probably so stable that it will fall into the pit first. Pain point 4. Global market turmoil under the Sino-US semiconductor game. The U.S. de-Sinicization ban this time actually increased the game between China and the United States in the semiconductor field. As the United States, Japan, and Europe have invested heavily in supporting their local chip industries, this game is no longer limited to China and the United States, but a global chip competition. But the problem is that the division of labor in global chip manufacturing is extremely detailed, and any link stuck will lead to a break in the industrial chain. The United States no longer purchases semiconductor components from China, which not only keeps costs high, but also allows China to further accelerate the process of localization of chips, thereby forming new competitiveness. On the other hand, Chinese companies are also looking for a way out by setting up factories or joint ventures in Singapore, Malaysia, and other places to circumvent U.S. sanctions. Although this curve to save the country is a bit helpless, it also shows China's adaptability in the global industrial chain. The more severe the U.S. blockade, the stronger China's self-healing ability. Under this chaos of global supply chain restructuring, the semiconductor market in the next few years is likely to be in turmoil. Although this wave of U.S. bans can stabilize its own technological advantages in the short term, in the long run, once China's domestic substitution path is successful, how long can U.S. companies maintain their global status?